Is there such a thing as a perfect film? No. Okay, thanks for watching. But no, seriously, there isn't. However, there are some films that come pretty close to being the almighty perfect. Films that people love, admire, films that can't be altered or tweaked or changed because what the heck would you alter, tweak or change to make them better? So, today I'm going to go through some of the films that I think are very close to being perfect. Note first though that these are not necessarily the greatest films ever made, nor are they necessarily my personal favourite films. Perfect does not mean great, but these examples kind of are. The first example of a perfect film requires us to go back to 1985, or 1955, whichever you prefer really.
1.21 gigawatts! Marty, we're sending you back to the future!
Back to the Future. This is a pretty formulaic film when you really look at it. Everything's really well laid out, well detailed, well planned, it's meticulous. And in terms of plot structure, it is a very standard plot structure. You have an equilibrium, someone breaks the equilibrium, they then have to address what's going on and then have to resolve it, and then there's the epilogue. It's a very straightforward story, but when you add in the adventure, you add in the comedy, you add in the action, you add in the science fiction, that's what really adds to Back to the Future. Of course, it's not just about the story. What really makes Back to the Future so good is the characters. They're iconic, they're classic, they've got really good quotable lines of dialogue. Marty McFly, and then you've got the Doc. They are a great team, a great double act. And then of course you've got Biff, the bully. You've got his dad, Crispin Glover. These characters are so iconic, so likable. Even the bully is likable in a certain regard. They've got their quirks, they've got their personalities. The film is just really well thought out, well directed, well edited, with a great score and soundtrack by John Williams. And in all honesty, the only real flaws of the film is its age. The fact that there is CGI and special effects in there which aren't quite up to the modern standards. There's even interviews and footage and evidence suggesting that the filmmakers weren't quite happy with some of the CGI and the workarounds they had to get to make it all work. But hey, age is just one thing. You can't really rely on it. But hey, you can't let age be a huge factor in this. Back to the Future is very damn near perfect. This next film is still in the 80s. Sort of. Either way, it's a real treasure. Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is Steven Spielberg and George Lucas teaming up together to make a blockbuster adventure pulp film, basically, based on the old comic arcs and pulp comics of like the 20s and 30s or whatever time period they were from. And this is one of the most fun, adventurous blockbuster movies you'll ever see. It's got something of everything. Action, comedy, romance, horror. The sets, the props, the costumes, the period detail was brilliant. They really went out their way to create a mood and a tone and look for this film, and it worked. In many ways, this is a film that defines what the modern blockbuster action comedy film should be. The likes of Jumanji, for example, really take inspiration from this. Any sort of action adventure movie that we see today takes inspiration from this. And of course, a lot of the stuff in here is done by special effects. There's practical stuff, there's more CGI orientated stuff, more limited in this particular entry. And they're all really great, they're all really impressive. And it stands up in pretty much every which way possible. Top it all off with the iconic character of Indiana Jones. I mean, the name itself is iconic. You know what Indiana Jones is, you know what Indiana Jones means and represents. Then add on the iconic score by John Williams yet again. John Williams pops up in a lot of these films, and you've got a film that from every which way you look at it, just nails it. Are there any flaws to this film? Well, arguably, there's one arguable flaw, which I'm going to get into right now, in that Indiana Jones, the main protagonist of the movie, doesn't do anything. I mean, if you look at the plot, you could take Indiana Jones out of this story altogether, and the exact flow of events would still happen. They would still find the Ark, they would still try and open it, they would still die at the end. Indiana Jones does nothing to stop the bad guys. In fact, he's just a bit of a nuisance to them. And arguably, your protagonist in the film should have a bit more agency, should have a bit more involvement, should actually succeed in doing something. Indiana Jones doesn't. For most of the film, he's just kind of there. And that's a weird choice to have in your big, leading Hollywood blockbuster action movie. But is it a bad thing? I don't know. The end result's still good, regardless. And now for a film where there isn't any story at all without the characters. Characters that are so devious and, dare I say it, parasitic. Yes, it's Parasite. This is another film that has a mix of tones and genres in there. There is some comedy in there. There is some thriller elements in there. There's some horror vibes in there as well. There's mystery. There's all sorts going on in this film, and it works really well. In fact, this is, I would say, one of the greatest films ever made. In terms of direction, editing, pacing, plotting, it's brilliant in every way, shape, and form. It's not entirely set in this one location, but there is a primary location of this movie, and it's well realized, well laid out. I could close my eyes and walk through that house. It's so well developed. And of course, it's a cool set as well. It's got a lot of good visuals to it. Top it off with what sometimes happens when you're watching a foreign language movie is sometimes the subtleties of what's being said and the performances is kind of lost because you're either paying too much attention to the subtitles, or because they're speaking a foreign language, you can't quite get from their visual facial expressions what they're getting at. So there is sometimes a disconnect between the acting and how good it is. This isn't the case. You can tell that these are all great actors. You can tell what the subtleties are. You can tell what their emotions are and their expressions. You can tell that this is a really well thought out, well performed film. And one of the best things about this film is that it's constantly twisting and turning. There's lots of twists, lots of surprises, lots of shocks in this movie. The first half of the movie, a very different film from the second half of the movie, without getting into spoilers. And I've watched this multiple times, it's just as good on repeat viewings as well. Same goes for Back to the Future, same goes for Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is one of them films where you can watch it multiple times. In fact, all of these films, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Back to the Future, Parasite, you can watch these films multiple times and get something new from them each and every time. And that's brilliant. This one is a horror film. Or maybe it's a science fiction film. Or maybe it's a bit of both. Or maybe it's not even the original film, maybe it's a mimic. But guess what, it is a mimic because it's a remake. It is John Carpenter's The Thing.
Mayday. Mayday. Anyone hear me? This is U.S. Station 31. You read me? Found something in the ice. We need some help down here. Can anybody hear me? We found something. We found something. We found something.
Probably the greatest horror film ever made, in my opinion. And I think it's without a doubt John Carpenter's best film. Doesn't even come close. Like, he's got Big Trouble in Little China, that's great. He's got Halloween, that's okay. He's got Escape from New York as well. There's a bunch of films that John Carpenter's done, very iconic films. This one stands well above all of them. It's a master in suspense and build-up. This is I'm not even going to say slow burn, because it's not slow burn. It takes a while for things to actually happen. The first hour of the film is all about developing the characters and location and setting things up. It's not until the hour in that we actually start to see the science fiction and horror come into play. So it's really suspenseful, it's really tense all the way through that first hour. And of course it's John Carpenter, so John Carpenter always does his own score. The score is another iconic John Carpenter score with the very like heartbeat-like music and tone to it. It's very slow, very moody, it sets a tone brilliantly. What really stands out about the thing though is the special effects. This was 1983, I believe, maybe 1982. I'll have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure it's one of them dates. And the special effects are all practical. There's no CGI here. They're using props, they're using puppetry, they're using practical, real effects that the actors could interact with. And it's gruesome, it's gory, it's brilliant. These special effects are better now than what some modern blockbusters are using. Are there flaws? Well, two things. The characters. The characters I think are well realized, they are well acted and performed, but you don't get a huge amount of them. So I would have liked to seen a little bit more from them. Does it damage the film at all? No. So is it a flaw? Not really. But it's something that maybe we could have seen a bit more from. And then the ending. The ending leaves things hanging. It leaves us wondering. It leaves us in a bit of a mystery. Who is the Thing? Are either of these people the Thing? Is one of them real? Is one of them not? Who knows? I actually like the ending. I like the cliffhanger ending of it all. I think it keeps us thinking, and yeah, we don't need a definitive answer here. So I like the ending. Is it a flaw? No, I don't think so. What's better than one superhero? A team of them? No, I can do better than that. How about a team of different variations of the same superhero? That's what happens in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Officer, I love you.
Wait, what?
That way. Other way.
Do animals talk in this dimension? Because I don't want to freak them out.
So this is an animated movie, and it's an animated movie like no other. It's got a very unique style, a very unique art design. It looks like nothing ever before it, and that's one of the things that really stands out. It's got a very comic book, panel by panel style to it in that it is missing out certain frames. It's very colourful, it's very artistic, it's very interesting and mesmerising. You really cannot take your eyes off this film in a good way. And like some of these other films, it mixes genres. There's action, there's comedy, there's thrills, there's some slight horror in there, and of course there's the superhero movie. The characters are fun, unique, they're quirky, they've got new interesting takes on classic Spider-Man characters like Kingpin and Doc Ock. Miles Morales just is Spider-Man now. Miles Morales is a big popular character in the comic books. This was the one that really brought him into the headlights. It really gave him a widespread mainstream appeal. And it's great to see a different version of Spider-Man, while still adhering to the Peter Parker version at the same time. And you've got the score and the soundtrack, which is flat out one of the greatest ever. The score and soundtrack is brilliant. It perfectly sums up Miles Morales as a character and the world he lives in, his culture, his background, the things he likes, the things he's interested in. It works perfectly in this film. So, any flaws? Because if it's not perfect, why isn't it perfect? Well, the themes, the messages, the story. These elements are fairly traditional superhero fare. So, it doesn't do anything different in that regard. It just nails what it's doing. It nails the superhero formula, it nails the superhero story, the themes, the messages, and all that stuff. So it is a bit of an issue that in terms of the story, it's not anything different or unique or special, except maybe the fact that it's bringing in the multiverse of Spider-Man. That is a little bit different, and we might be seeing in later 2021 that a live action film might be doing that. Who knows? So I've got one more film I want to talk about because it's almost time for this video to die. But before we do, this last one really makes us have to go out in a hard way.
Do you really think you have a chance against us, Mr. Cowboy?
Yippee-ki-yay. You hang in there.
So Die Hard is an action movie which is actually much more grounded and believable and relatable than the action movies that were coming out at the time period. In the 80s, you had like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone coming in big, beefy, muscle-bound men, just destroying things with explosions all over the place. So then you bring in Bruce Willis, and he brings things right down to the ground. He's a very relatable, likable character, and he seems like a real person. He's got problems, he's got a broken up marriage, he's coming home for Christmas, and all of a sudden there's this heist going on that he just gets caught up in. The characters, the story is all grounded and believable. So's the action. The action is exciting and fun and thrilling, but it's never like ridiculous. It's never just explosions all over the place for the sake of it. And it's only as good as the villain. The villain is iconic as well. Alan Rickman comes in with a brilliant performance, and again, a grounded bad guy. Prior to this, films like Stallone's and Schwarzenegger's would have these comedic moments where the good guys would have like one-liners and little puns and jokes here and there just to add some levity and also to break from the extreme action that was going on around them. This film doesn't do that quite. There is comedy in there, but again, it feels much more real and feels much more believable and natural. It's not like they're just coming up with their jokes to try and break the illusion for a second. This feels like Bruce Willis's character is just a bit of a jokester. And those are the near perfect films that I'm going to talk about today. I'm sure there are some others out there, there's not too many. I can't think of any off the top of my head. There's a few that are arguable there. So let me know in the comments and feedback down below. What are the perfect films out there that I might have not talked about today? And of course, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @the_Graham_Burton if you want. But most importantly, subscribe to my channel to get more content like this. Until next time though, thanks for watching.